Thanks, Mark. It's wonderful to be here with all of you and to close this circle of our weekly practice intensive here. I want to dedicate my teachings and the practices I'll be guiding us through to Leah Chana Bat Margalit, a friend who is very sick with COVID and whose internal organs and body systems are beginning to shut down after a long struggle. And the word refuah in our tradition, which means healing, also means slackness or looseness. So even if she can't be healed, may there be spaciousness and a sense of expanse, even in the midst of travail and pain and suffering. And may it be so for everyone who's sick in the world today. Let's do a quick reprise of the first three dimensions we've been exploring. If you're just arriving today, no problem. If you have a body, a heart, a mind, and if you're conscious, you'll be able to find a way in. So I want to invite us to get established in our little vehicle, our Merkava, our chariot, and really land with fullness of presence, with awareness, moment by moment, in the sensations of the body. And that could be the rising and falling of breath. If that feels triggering for you, you can focus on points of contact between your body and its support, or your body and the ground beneath. Or alternatively, you can focus on sounds. And your eyes can be open or closed, whatever feels safe and sustaining for you today. If your eyes are open, allow them to be downcast so that you're not staring at the screen. The soft, open gaze. We just land here in the body and begin moment by moment to suffuse the body with awareness in the present moment, surrendering fully, and if not fully, to whatever extent possible, to the divine unfolding that's transpiring through each of our individual bodies. Allowing whatever arises on the level of sensation to be just as it is. And when you feel ready, you can move your attention up into the world of the heart. What's arising on the level of emotion, feeling? And we continue to surrender wholeheartedly to whatever is here in the emotional body. We can also notice if it's difficult to surrender and if there may be any resistance, and we can accept and hold any resistance with tremendous love and appreciation. Here's my system trying to shelter me from pain. What a blessing. And here we can see if we can incline the heart toward love and reverence. And when we're ready, we can then center our focus, our mindfulness, our awareness in the world of the mind, observing thoughts, images, and other mental phenomena come and go. Becoming aware of the contents of the mind. Observing the contents of the mind rather than being swept into the stream of thought. And filling the mind with as much radiant consciousness as we can muster, but in a soft and loving way. Surrendering into each thought, allowing it to be as it is, holding it with love and reverence. And inclining the mind both toward recognizing these thoughts as part of the divine totality, waves within the ocean of energy moving through the mind. And also as vessels for the light of consciousness to permeate, to become manifest. So this is as far as we've come on our journey. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they've been closed. And essentially, each of us human beings is comprised of a body, feelings and emotions, and thoughts. A mind that thinks, right? And that spins stories and narratives, and a mind that says, I am this or I am that, right? I am old, I am young, I am middle-aged, I'm rich, I'm poor, right? I'm strong, I'm weak. I'm loving, I'm not loving, I'm nice, I'm mean, everything's okay, I'm struggling, right? And the thoughts in the mind are very much connected to and conditioned by our emotional life and our emotional level of balance or reactivity, as well as our sensations, right, in the body. That's basically all ego stuff, right? And it's all got a discrete form, discrete edges and boundaries. Right? You can watch how one thought arises, it stays for a while, and then it passes, right? That's a form, that's a mental form or a mental formation. The same with, let's say, the feeling of love that arises in the heart, right? It arises, we feel it, perhaps it intensifies, and then it changes and subsides. It's a form, it has duration, it has edges and boundaries, right? Same with sensations in the body. The body is traditionally what we think of as, form, has discrete edges and boundaries, but so too for every sensation that arises. It has a specific duration. It's impermanent, right? And yet we tend to identify the locus of our self, right? When we say I, what we're usually referring to, because we're not paying close attention, is a series of impermanent forms, right? That come together in aggregate form to create a sense of a solid and separate sense of self. Sorry, a sense of a solid and separate self. Today we're going to be, through our meditative prayer practice, inclining ourselves toward falling into ayin, the formless state, right? Which, is empty of self. And the Buddhists call this shunyata, or emptiness, right? The Hasidic masters call it ayin, which basically means the same thing, right? No thing, the absence of form. And some other traditions call this the true self with a capital S. Okay. Don't be confused by the nomenclature. We're essentially looking to the same phenomenon. A part of us that transcends forms, right? And that isn't conditioned in any way. So I want to turn back for a moment to our map, which you can see up here, right? We've made our way through the world of Asiya, Yetzira, and Bria. These all comprise our sense of yesh, right? Our sense of being a separate self, a something. And this is the narrow self we tend to identify with as I, me, and mine, right? And today we're going to be jumping into ayin. And the prayer that takes us into this world of atzilut, nearness or emanation, right? Because on the level of ayin, we're directly proximate to the divine source. And this is a world of pure spirit. And so we do that work through the silent prayer, the Amidah, because this is also a realm that is beyond language. And as such, can't really be described. It can only be experienced. It's the silent stillness at the core of our being. And I don't want you to take my word for any of this. I want you to check it out in your own experience. So we turn again to Rabbi Morgenstern here in his treatise on non-dual meditation. We're still in the fourth gate, which describes the feeling of rising through the worlds. And he says, we then ascend from the world of Bria, which is where we were yesterday, right? The world of the spiritual mind, the mind suffused with a sense, right, of divinity, of luminous consciousness. And we begin to engrave in the mind actual feelings of self-dissolution. Right? The word in Hebrew is bitul, which literally means nullification. Right? The Hebrew phrase here is bitul hayesh mamash, right? The actual feeling of self-dissolution. Okay. I just want to say that language might feel a little harsh for you, right? We live in a culture that's all about building up the self, right? Self-determination, autonomy, and the language of self-dissolution or self-nullification may feel really harsh or scary. And that may be especially true if we live in a social context, and many of us do here in America, no matter the color of our skin, where we've been robbed of a sense of self, where we've been silenced and told that we're essentially less human, right? So I just want to say, if you don't feel ready to go into this domain, you don't have to, right? You can continue working with the first 3 levels and moving down to Asiya, into Yetzira, into Bria, the body, the heart, the mind, and then go back down to Asiya and keep doing that work, right? There's no requirement here to touch the formless. If that feels in some way like it's doing violence to yourself. But when we rest in that place, says our teacher, we feel that we are subsidiary to the one and completely devoid of self in the presence of the master of all that is. With assistance from the transcendent one, through this practice, we may merit to feel the blissful light of chokhmah, right? The light of the wisdom mind, which is pure consciousness, pure spirit, in the world of Atzilut, the formless world of pure spiritual emanation or proximity to the divine. Once we rest in the blissful light of Atzilut, he says, we can then return and descend once more, contemplating thoughts of surrender yet again in the world of Asiya, the world of the spiritual body. From there, we can ascend once again to Yetzira, the world of the spiritual heart, and then again to the world of Bria, the world of the spiritual mind, and finally Atzilut, the formless world of pure spiritual emanation or proximity, as explained above. This word Atzilut, by the way, also conveys a sense of intimacy, right? A sense of deep intimacy with our true nature and also with the divine source from which we flow. He says we are to ascend and descend a number of times, thereby meriting to experience the spiritual light in each of the 4 dimensions with greater ease, right? So he's basically saying the more you do this practice, and the more you kind of ascend and descend the ladder of ascent, which we described on Monday, right, through the lens of the Zohar, that is the ladder of prayer, the easier it is to feel the divine presence manifesting in each of these dimensions of our being, right? Until our whole being glows with God's presence, essentially. So that's something you can try on your own, after today, because we're only going to have enough time today for a one-way journey. But I want to encourage you to take this practice with you into your regular prayer life and into your life in general. And Mark, I hope we'll have some time to talk about that question toward the end for those who want to stay on for 15 minutes of Q&A. So I just want to say a couple of words about the Amidah, and then we're going to jump into practice. This is a beautiful, beautiful teaching by Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, one of my blessed teachers, now dearly departed. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of the righteous be for blessing. He's reflecting here on why we do the Amidah silently, right? Why is this a silent prayer? And yes, of course, the Amidah has plenty of words in it, right? But it's called the silent prayer. And I think people have lost the sense of the Amidah as a time for really deep silence. So he goes on to say, because the greatest thing we can do is to offer our stillness to the divine, to make ourselves so transparent to the infinite that the ego doesn't offer any resistance. Right? But since this is so difficult, the Amidah consists of all the things which come up in a person's mind. For example, I am so blessed to have had ancestors which created and passed to me a tradition of seeking God. That's the first blessing of the Amidah, right? Kind of in distilled form. Where I am aware of the cycle of life and death. That's the third blessing of the Amidah, Mechayeh HaMetim. Or when I still myself, that's the second blessing. Or when I still myself, I feel holiness. That's the third blessing, right? I'm trying to quiet myself so I can place all of my awareness in the right place so that I can harmonize myself, so that I can be forgiven my sins, right? So he's hinting here to the middle blessings. And so the Amidah unfolds, but better even than just the recital of the individual prayers is to return after each one to the stillness and then resume the formal prayer only when you can't hold the stillness anymore. It's a very strong thing to do. Right? So when we can abide in this silent stillness at the core of our being, then when we do begin to pray, when the words do come, right, they flow from that place. And as such, they really emerge from our spiritual heart, that is the core of who we really are. I'm not talking about the heart as an organ here, right, but really the core of who we are. So we're going to abide in stillness when we get to that domain. Right? And if you do feel moved to pray at some point, I want to offer one of two options. Right? One is the phrase that we say before beginning the Amidah, Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agiti latecha, right? Luminous presence, open my lips so that my mouth may utter your praise. When we're resting in the formless state, we're so close to the divine source that sometimes it can totally feel like words are unnecessary and that the silence itself is prayer. And yet, we may feel moved to utter words of prayer, so we can actually ask for the words to come, because we may be so deeply drawn into the silence simultaneously that it may be difficult to find speech at all, even if the impulse to pray arises. Or the final blessing of the Amidah, the blessing for peace, Barchinu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad Bor Panecha, bless all of us, right, as one, O Divine Mother, with the light radiating from your face, which is basically a request for more consciousness to flow from the source, right, into our being. So don't worry, I'll put this up when it's time. And Adi dropped the source sheet. And what I want to invite us to do right now is just to settle and find our Merkava once again, find our place in the chariot of the body, settling in the present moment with eyes open or closed. We find our anchor in the body. And we surrender. Kabbalat ol malchut shamayim. We take upon ourselves the yoke of the kingship of heaven, the sovereignty of the divine unfolding. And so rather than trying to change or intervene or manipulate or control what's here in the body, we simply become aware with a loving, accepting attitude. And if you'd like, you can use the prayer mantra, Roka haaretz al hamayim. Blessed is the one who spreads firm ground upon the waters. Reciting it again and again silently in the mind or in a hush. Allowing the phrase to enable you to rest faithfully upon this firm ground and relax all of your striving. Allowing the phrase to draw more consciousness and awareness into the body itself. And when we feel the body becoming a little bit more transparent, a bit more luminous and radiant, then we know that our vehicle of the body is well prepared, and we can then ascend into the level of the heart, from the world of Asiya into the world of Yetzira, heart formation. Becoming aware of emotions, we simply surrender, relax into, allow. And then if you'd like, you can use the mantra Kol Haneshama Tehalleliyah Hallelujah, distilled into English as every breath a prayer. Remaining aware of what's happening at the heart level, even as you focus your attention on the prayer focus phrase, and inclining the mind toward meeting the in-breath or whatever sensation or feeling may be arising right in this moment as an expression of love given freely by the universe. And then on the out-breath, or as sensations subside, letting go with a sense of reverence, of awe. Feeling our own emotional life as part of the pulsation of the divine, like a wave of the ocean coming into shore and then subsiding, and coming into shore and then subsiding. If and when we feel consciousness permeating our emotional life, with feelings of surrender, love, and awe, we can now turn to the level of the mind, the world of Bria, the world of mental forms, observing the thoughts and the images moving through the mind. And it's already possible at this point that there may not be a whole lot of mental activity. Which can happen when we become very, very present. But that also may not be the case. So we just observe and surrender and meet what's here with love and reverence. And then intentionally, we fill the mind with very lofty concepts that stretch the mind to its farthest reaches. And we can do that with the help of the Shema and the Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Hear, O Israel, the ground of being, our God, the ground of being is one. There's nothing else. And the word one, we can imagine ourselves dissolving into the infinitude of the light of God. And as we recite Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed and fix our attention on that phrase, we can imagine that light permeating our whole being. You might envision the light all around you merging with the light within. The light all around moving in and the light within moving out until the two meet and the edges of self dissolve. And then when you're ready, let that all go and just abide in silent stillness. Aware of the radiant consciousness that's flowing through all of your being from the very core of your being. Simply become aware of this knowing at the center of your being. You're not making this knowing happen, are you? Is it not more accurate to say that it's just streaming into your being spontaneously? And unlike the chattering mind, which speaks incessantly, commenting on our physical and emotional experience, is this pure consciousness at the core of your being speaking at all? Or does it remain effortlessly silent and still? And is this knowing delimited by anything, constrained by anything, or is it the very luminous space in which all phenomena, all forms arise and pass away? And as such, just luminous expanse. So let's see if we can practice a kind of Amidah practice, just being still, resting in this silent part of ourselves. And if the impulse to utter something, praise, a request, arises, you can turn to the prayers on the screen here. Or utter any spontaneous prayer that may arise out of this luminous core of who you are. This still, silent, peaceful, loving, radiant, and knowing awareness. And we'll close with a short meditation by Eknath Iswaran from God Makes the Rivers to Flow. Meditation enables us to see the lineaments of our true self and to chip away the stubbornly selfish tendencies that keep it locked within, quite forgotten. In meditation, the inspirational passage is the chisel. Our concentration is the hammer, and our resolute will delivers the blows. And how the pieces fly. A very small, fine chisel edge, as you know, can wedge away huge chunks of stone. When we use our will to drive the thin edge of the passage deep into consciousness, we get the purchase to pry loose tenacious habits and negative attitudes. I'll turn it over now to Mark to bring us home into Mourner's Kaddish.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sam. Friends, we seal our practice today, as we do every day, by offering those who are in mourning, observing a yard site, or for whom it's the practice to participate, to share in the words of the Kaddish and to share the name or names of those they're honoring today in the chat box, either now or after we recite Kaddish, and for everyone else to be present, to be attentive, to be compassionate witnesses, and invite those who are reciting Kaddish to join me in rising in body or in spirit for Kaddish together. Yitgadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yama, Tivra, Kirute, Yamlich, Malchute, Chayechon, Yamechon, Chaye, Bechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'adala, B'Bitan Karid, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Yehi
Shmei
Shmei
Rabba,
Rabba
Barak,
Mabarak Li'olam Ome Omaya.
Amaya. Yitra, Yishtabach, Yitzhar, Imam, Yitase, Yitadar, Yitalel, Yitalal, Yitzrich,
Richu.
La'ela, B'Chol, B'Rachata, B'Shirata, B'Shikata, B'Nechem, B'Amiran, Ba'alma, B'Imru,
Amen.
Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Ben Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'Al Yisrael, B'Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom B'Rama, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, V'Al Yisrael, V'Al Yoshvei Tevel, B'Imru.
Amen.
May those among us who are in mourning and be comforted among all those who mourn in this world. I want to thank our dear friend and teacher, Rabbi Sam Feinsmith, for just a masterful week of teaching and practice together that I hope will stay with us for a long time. Just a reminder before, if there are people who are leaving, Adi, if you would put the link to the survey, we really would welcome your feedback about this specific week-long offering and the concept of offering these week-long intensives with various teachers, and are very attentive to your feedback. So please do take just a moment, a few minutes, or even less really, to offer us that feedback now or soon. For those who are leaving, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a Chodesh Tov. We'll hope to be back next week to practice with us. We'll be back on Monday at the usual time. We want to thank Adi Stein. We want to thank Valerie Taylor for sponsoring this full week of practice. We're deeply grateful to you, Valerie, and we all have benefited so much from it. And of course, want to thank Adi Stein for holding us with skill and grace, and thank all of you for being here to create this community of practice. For those who are leaving, Shabbat Shalom. For those who are staying on for a few minutes of questions, conversations with Sam about the teaching, please do put it in the chat box. Try to keep an eye on it. And you'll see that on the survey, there's an opportunity to indicate if you have an interest in a more extended Q&A session with Sam, where we can get to many more questions than we're able to in the few minutes that we have after the sit. And with that, I want to sit down with you, my dear friend, Sam. And so thanks for an incredible one-way ticket. So we're part of the conversation will be like, where do we go to get the return trip ticket? And more than that, where do we go to buy a book of round trip tickets to keep, as Rabbi Morgenstern says, fly and return with greater ease each time. So I want to ask you a question first, just about the one-way journey, actually, and this may resonate with some of folks here. For those of us who, as you led us so skillfully each day, taking us one step further through this journey, either, got stuck or distracted, or, a little bit, just, decided to dwell a little bit longer in one place before we went on. What would you say to people who say, like, I just, either I spaced out, I got distracted, or I was so entranced with where I was that I didn't, I lost the thread, or the group moved on without me, which I imagine happened for many, if not most, if not all of us at some point.
Yeah.
So what would you say about that?
First of all, for those who have your video enabled, who got distracted here? Right, you can raise your hand. Yeah. So I wish we had had more time, because Rabbi Morgenstern also provides 3 concrete techniques for overcoming distraction and working with the distracted mind. We're liable to become distracted with, days, weeks, months, years of practice, we can hone our concentration and go for long periods of time without getting distracted. But at some point, we will get distracted, right? So we definitely need to know how to work with a distracted mind. And I'll just quickly summarize his 3 techniques. The first one we know from our regular mindfulness practice, right, which is do teshuvah, come back, return, right? Chazara, come back, return to the meditation object. Notice the mind wandering. You don't need to push it away. You don't need to get angry at it. You don't need to judge it, but come back, right? And, especially in light of the engraving practice, each time we come back, we're engraving the bless you, the mantra, a little bit more deeply into our psyche, right? And the deeper you engrave it, the more stuck it becomes in your psyche, right? So, sometimes when I do these practices, I'll find myself, thinking about them when I wake up in the morning, right? Which means that they're there in my subconscious mind, right? You want to embed them so deeply into the subconscious that they start to kind of work and just flow in the mind in the way that a song that you listen to.
Like instead of an earworm, it's a soul
300 times, right? Exactly. Instead of an earworm, it becomes a soul worm. And they arise unbidden. Right. So now instead of your mind thinking about the usual, stuff that it thinks about, now suddenly there are holy thoughts permeating the mind, right, which inclines the mind toward liberation and toward recognizing its source. That's A, right? The second technique he offers is that sometimes the distraction is so strong you need to neutralize it, right? You need something that can just cut through it, right? And so for those of you who may be familiar with loving kindness or metta practice, that's a really good practice for cutting through afflictive mind states that kind of grab your attention and won't let go, right? So for example, sometimes I'll be meditating and my mind's really not settling. And it's because I'm caught up in some cycle of craving or aversion, fixating on something, and I just my mind can't let it go. It's sticky. So I'll do loving kindness practice for myself because that experience of fixating on something is quite unpleasant and the heart contracts. So I'll say, may I feel peaceful. May I feel easeful, right? May I be free from suffering, and what that does is little by little, it kind of cuts through the afflictive mind state and returns the mind to its natural spaciousness and buoyancy. And then it's easy to focus.
What about sleepiness?
Yeah, I'll get there in a minute. The third technique that he offers is the one that really helps us to purify our karma, right? Which is welcome it. Whatever distraction is arising, it's coming because there's unfinished business in your psyche, either from, he does say this, right, inherited karmic tendencies from past lives, right? And I actually have some experience that would lead me to believe that, at least for me, right, that's true. And also our transgressions, our unskillful actions while in this incarnation, right? So we'll often look away when we've done something unskillful because it's painful to see that we've hurt someone or hurt ourselves in some way, right? But that stuff doesn't go away when you repress it. So in your meditation practice, it surfaces and it says, pay attention to me. I need attention. I need love. I need to be integrated into your system so that I'm no longer relegated to the margins and so that you can become more whole. Because as long as you're denying a part of yourself, you're fractured, right? And you're not a whole person. And so what we do then is we welcome it wholly, we invite it in, and we make that the object of our concentration and of our focus, right? We explore, where is this in the body? How does it feel? Are the phenomena that comprise it, permanent or impermanent? What are the emotional qualities that go along with it? What are the thoughts in the mind? What are the memories, right? And we kind of sit a little bit with the pain and the loss and the grief. And we welcome it, and hold it to whatever extent we can. And oftentimes that will then allow it to become resolved and integrated. And then the mind can return to its focused state. And you will have not only created the conditions to become concentrated once again, but you also will have purified and liberated yourself from, old karma that's been there all along, causing you suffering.
Yeah.
Of becoming fixated with a particular state, and Mark, I realize we're a little short on time, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? But at some point, we want to arrive at a part of us that transcends states, right? It's very nice to abide in altered states of consciousness that can be very blissful. It's very nice, but they're all impermanent, and as such, they're all forms, right? And they're conditioned, and we can cling to them as we can cling to any other experience or any other part of self. But we're not just going for bliss here, right? We're going for liberation. And liberation comes with a recognition of our true self and a weakening of our identification with the other small selves or components of small self that we usually hold on to so tightly and defensively. So at some point, it's a good idea to move on and continue to work toward going deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to your spiritual core, right? Which is empty of clinging and empty of self, and the place from which we can lay our conditioning bare and loosen the cords, as it were, of the small self and the grasp that it holds over the mind. Mark, I don't know if you want me to answer the sleepiness piece now, or if we want to take another question.
You know what? Well, just because we have 3 minutes, here's the thing. I think we should address the question about coming back down to earth.
Yep.
And bringing this, this is I think it's a powerful experience. And I guess the question is, how do we take this off the cushion, as they say, right? Like when folks are at the checkout counter buying their challah this afternoon, where, in Nazi loot,
Yep.
how are we going to do that?
Yeah, that's great. So I said before, like, you can take someone to Atzilut right away, right? Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, when he first met his principal student, Rabbi Nassan, Rav Nassan of Nemirov, he said to him, "You want ayin? I can take you to ayin like this," right? Because once again, it's not something we're acquiring, it's who we are. We just don't see it, right? It's kind of hidden in plain sight. We are this loving, spacious, expansive, luminous consciousness, right? We're spirit. But we're so caught up in identifying with the other parts of ourselves that we can't see it, right? And our attention is often directed outward. And but the problem with that kind of an experience of taking someone directly there is that it's not sustainable, right? You can't stabilize it and you can't live it. You can certainly abide in it for a little while, but you can't live it. So when we work through each of the dimensions and suffuse them with the light of that consciousness, right, which flows from the source at the core of our being, then when I'm in a situation where, I'm in the physical world and I've tasted a bunch of times that experience of being suffused, the physical reality of my being being suffused with consciousness, then I can be in the physical world and have the sense, right, that this consciousness is radiating and permeating the whole physical world, and that the person at the checkout counter, right, is luminous and divine in the way that I am, right, which will impact, of course, how I treat them, right, not just, and will impact the relationship. It's not just going to be a transactional thing. It's like we're two souls meeting here, right, through this embodied experience. And the same goes with, times when there may be some relational or emotional challenge, right? I've suffused the heart with so much light that now I can access that when I'm having a fight with my spouse or a disagreement with my spouse, right? And I can recognize that here and now. And the same when my mind is going wild with anxiety or, fear about a deadline or some afflictive memory, right? I can remember, oh, wait, right? I know the feeling of my mind being suffused with consciousness, and that can liberate me from these obsessive thought patterns and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's why the going by degree through different stages is really, really important.
Right. All right. So everybody, please do not disembark. we are going to turn this plane right around and come back to our destination. I know there are a lot of questions. I was just reminding you that on the survey, there's an opportunity to indicate an interest in a more extended Q&A session with Sam, which I know you're very generously willing to offer, Sam, assuming we can find the time. So don't worry, you'll be able to send questions to Sam, be able to answer them. I put in the chat box the link. There is a playlist for these 5 sessions, which has the link as well to all the text sheets that were shared, the source sheets that Sam shared. So you can revisit them as often and as much as you would like. So please do respond to the survey. Please give us your honest feedback. And once again, I want to thank you, Sam, for really brilliant teaching and practice leading. And thank all of you for this amazing devotion that you've shown all week long to really, high level, very challenging material that, Sam, you made accessible so beautifully. And thanks to Adi, and thank you, Valerie, once more. And again, as always, most of all, thanks to all of you for being here and creating this beautiful community of practice. So wishing you all a Chodesh Tov. May it bring many blessings to you and to all of us and to this planet. And Shabbat Shalom, a sweet restorative Shabbat. And we'll see you on Monday. Be well, everyone.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.